This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Rabbi say Parshas Tetzaveh. Parshas Tetzaveh enjoys a feature that no other Parsha enjoys from the time that Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the scene, and that is, there is somebody whose name is conspicuously absent from Parshas Tetzaveh, and that is none other than Moshe Rabbeinu. From the time Moshe Rabbeinu was born in Parsha Shemos, all the way to the end of the Torah, every single Parsha makes mention of Moshe Rabbeinu, with the exception of Parshas Tetzaveh. And the question is why? Why is Moshe Rabbeinu's name omitted from this week's Parsha? This is a very famous question, and there are a number of well-known answers. Well, one very well-known answer, of course, we're probably familiar with, is that when the Ribbon Shalom told Moshe Rabbeinu, what are these Jews building the golden calf for? Well, I just gave them the Torah, and the next day they're building the golden calf. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wipe out the Jewish people, and I'm going to start a new nation from you. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, no way, not a chance. If you do that, Mecheni na, please wipe me out, misifracha asher kasafta, from the book that you wrote. Now, in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu is striking a deal with Hashem. He's saying, Hashem, he's twisting Hashem's arm, so to speak. Hashem, if you're going to destroy Klal Yisrael, take my name out of the Torah. Now, what did Hashem do? Hashem didn't destroy Klal Yisrael. Hashem kept Klal Yisrael going. So we would think then, so Moshe Rabbeinu's name can appear in the Torah. But there's a concept that when a chacham, when a tzaddik makes a klala, makes a curse, so then even if it's on condition, even if it's based on a stipulation, even if the stipulation is not met, the curse still comes true. Like we find where Yehuda said to Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov, if I don't bring Binyamin back, so then I lose my share in the world to come. So Yehuda did bring Binyamin, but nevertheless, Yehuda still had a very hard time getting into Olam Haba. The Gemara talks about how his bones were rattling, and even finally when that stopped, he had a hard time getting into the yeshiva Shel Mala, and even when he got in, he had a hard time asking questions. So we know there's a principle that when a chacham makes a curse, even if it's on Tanai, in some way the curse takes place. And therefore, since Moshe Rabbeinu said, wipe my name out of your sefer, even though it was only if God would destroy the Jewish people, and Hashem didn't, nevertheless, Moshe Rabbeinu's name was omitted from Parshas Tetzaveh. Why Parshas Tetzaveh? So here in the name of the Ben Ish Chai says like this. Moshe says, Mecheni na misifre cha. Wipe me out from Sefer Chaf, from the 20th book in the Torah. Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha, Vayerach, Vayisara, Todos, Vayetzeh, Vayishlach, Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayichi, Shmois, Vayera, Boy, B'Shalach, Yisrael, Mishpatim, Truma, Tetzaveh. The 20th Parsha in the Torah is Parshas Tetzaveh. Moshe said, Mecheni na misifra Sefer Chaf, and therefore he was taken out of Parshas Tetzaveh. Another reason the Torah brings down, Torah says like this, Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to be Kohen Gadol. Why not? There he could be the Melech, he could be the leader, he could be the Navi. Why not go for the Kahuna Gedola? Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to be the Kohen Gadol. So therefore Hashem wanted to spare Moshe the anguish of having to read his name in the context of the Parsha that talks about what the Kohen Gadol wore. So in order to spare Moshe Rabbeinu the anguish of seeing his name in the Parsha and not being able to wear the Begadim of the Kohen Gadol, so Hashem omitted his name from the Parsha. And then finally we have an answer from the Sefer Divrei Eliyahu. It says like this: every single year without exception, Parshas Tetzaveh comes out the week of Zayin Adar. What happened on Zayin Adar? The Yartzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe's name is not in Parshas Tetzaveh, so we read the Parsha, we say, where is Moshe Rabbeinu? What happened to him? Oy! This is unfortunately the week that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. And even this week, even though it's in Ibriyar, Zayin Adar Aleph is still, I believe it's Friday. So these are three reasons why Moshe Rabbeinu's name does not appear in this Parsha. Rabbi Sai, you're very lucky you came here tonight, because tonight we're going to give a brand new reason, an innovative reason, a very creative reason, an unbelievable reason why Moshe Rabbeinu's name does not appear in Parshas Tetzaveh. Okay. Rabbi Sai, we're ready in Chodesh Adar. It's never too early to talk about Purim, right? You could talk about Purim the whole year. On my night table already I have my Purim Svarim, right? So we're ready, we're close enough to the Yom Tov of Purim. We're going to talk a little bit about Purim tonight. Okay, look at number 2. The Ramah tells us in our Chaim, Siman Tafrei Tzaddik Sif Beis, Yesh Shenoagu Lilboish Bigdei Shabbos V'Yom Tov B'Purim. There are those who have the custom to wear Shabbos clothing and Yom Tov clothing on Purim. Now, over Shabbos, we gave a shiur about if you know how to read the words of the Ramah, the word Nahagu does not mean the Ramah endorses the minhag. Nahagu just means people do it. And the Ramah doesn't endorse the minhag. That's what the word Nahagu means in the Ramah. But nevertheless, the Ramah says, V'chein nachain. This minhag I endorse. You should wear, what should you wear on Purim and Shul? Not a clown costume. Don't dress up like the President of the United States. Not in Shul. What should you do? Right? What should you do? You should wear Big Day Shabbos. You should wear Big Day Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, not only should you wear Big Day Shabbos, Purim Day, Kasvu Hachroinim, Dinachain Lilbosh Big Day Shabbos, Gam Kain Mi Ba'erev. You should wear Shabbos clothing the night of Purim. Why? Doesn't say. And not only that, when you come home, the candles should be lit, and the table should be set, and all the linen should be straightened out. In other words, on Purim, you should adorn your house as if it would be Shabbos Kodesh. I just have one simple question for you. Just answer this question. Is Purim a Yom Tov?
No.
The answer is no. Purim is not a Yom Tov in any way. It's not a Yom Tov. She says, what do you mean? It says in the Megillah, Mishteh v'simcha v'yom tov. But you have to know there are 2 psukim that appear in the Megillah. One pasuk appears that says Mishteh v'simcha v'yom tov, and another pasuk says Mishteh v'simcha and doesn't say Yom Tov. So what does the Gemara Megillah say on Daf Hayam and Beis? That when Mordechai and Esther wanted to make Purim, they wanted to make it a Yom Tov. Mishteh, simcha, and no work, no malacha. And you know what Klal Yisrael said? Be happy we're laning the Megillah, Mordechai. We're not taking off. We're not having an Isser Malacha. Klal Yisrael was never Makabel Purim as a Yom Tov. You're allowed to do Malacha. You're allowed to turn on the light. You're allowed to drive a car. Even the restrictions of Chol Hamoed do not apply to Purim. So you don't go to work. Chazal say if you work on Purim, you're not going to see Siman Bracha. But nevertheless, Me'ikar Hadin, there's no Isser Malacha like on a Yom Tov. So if Purim is not a Yom Tov, why would the Ramah say that you should wear Shabbos clothing on Purim? Does anybody here know anybody that wears Shabbos clothing on Chanukah? There's no such minhag of wearing Big Day Shabbos on Chanukah. Don't do it. Big Day Shabbos on Rosh Chodesh? No, in yeshiva you have to wear a white shirt. If you want to get a donut, you have to wear a white shirt. But there's no minhag of wearing Big Day Shabbos on Rosh Chodesh. Now you can make the case that Big Day Rosh Chodesh is more of a moyed even than Purim. So what's the Ramah saying that on Purim you should wear Big Day Shabbos? Why should you wear Big Day Shabbos on Purim? I mean, you're not. Let's say a person said, "I'm going to wear Big Day Shabbos on Tuesday or on Tu B'Shvat." There's no such minhag. It's a minhag toss. You can't. Well, I feel because it's a Yom Tov Leilanes, I'm going to wear Big Day Shabbos. You're mevazeh Big Day Shabbos. You can't just wear Big Day Shabbos whenever you want. So you don't do it on Chanukah. You don't do it on Rosh Chodesh. Why should you do it on Purim? Okay. Rabbi, so we have to talk a little bit about the Mishkan. When we talk about the Mishkan, Chazal say that the Mishkan was not just a little hut or a little building where they did Avodas Hashem. But instead, the Mishkan was on a much deeper level. It says the day that they put up the Mishkan, it says the words, Vayehi b'yom hakim es ha-Mishkan. It says the word Vayehi. It says the Medrash Rabbah, Parshas Masai, whenever it says the word Vayehi, and it was, you know what Vayehi signifies? And something that was a long time ago and stopped, recontinued. That's what the word Vayehi means. Vayehi means something that used to be, it stopped, and then it started again. So it says about the Mishkan the word Vayehi. Why does it say the word Vayehi by the Mishkan? The answer is, says the Medrash, you know what the Mishkan accomplished? The Mishkan, we learned, was a microcosm of the universe. The Mishkan was an Olam Katan. And until the Mishkan was set up, the world was wobbly. The world was unstable. The world was fluid. It had no stability. It had no basis. erection of the Mishkan, putting up of the Mishkan, gave the world kiyum. It gave the world standing. It solidified the world. In what way? Says the Medrash, there was something that the world had when Hashem created it. It was lost, and the Mishkan restored it. What was that? The presence of Hashem, the Hashras Hashchina. Says the Medrash, we find that before Adam Harishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, where was God? Hashem was in Gan Eden. Like the Pasuk says, Vayishmu es koil Hashem Elokim mishalich b'gan. God was actually walking in the garden. God was strolling in the garden. And then Adam Harishon did the sin, and the Ribbon Shalom said, sorry, adios, I'm out of here. For how long did the Ribbon Shalom leave the world? For approximately 2,448 years, until the day the Mishkan was erected on the first day of Nisan, after Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim. So the Mishkan brought the Shechina to the world. The Shechina was in the world originally. It left because of the Eitz Hadas, when Adam ate from the Eitz Hadas, and then it came back to the world when the Mishkan was erected. The job of Aron HaKohen was somehow, by doing the Avodah in the Mishkan, by bringing the Karbanos, by wearing the Big Day Kahuna, that would restore the world to the state it was before Adam Harishon ate from that fruit. Therefore, Rabbi said today we're going to see Devarim Niflam from a very important sefer. The name of the sefer is Tzrar Hamor. Tzrar Hamor was written by one of the early Achronim, Rabbi Avram Saba. Avram Saba is a name that's not so well known, but he's really a very unbelievable personality. He was born in the year 1440, passed away in 1508. So you hear somebody's born in 1440, passed away in 1508, so you know he was probably somehow involved in the Gerushay Sfarad. And in fact, at the age of 52, so Rabbi Avram Saba was already a very accomplished scholar. In 1492, he was exiled from Spain. He's exiled from Spain. Where does he go? He goes to, next stop, Portugal. Comes to Portugal. He thinks he's going to have a safe haven. He begins writing his commentary on the Chumash, which is called Tzrar Hamor, 5 volumes on Chamishay Chumshei Torah. He has 1 volume on Megillas Rus, 1 volume on Megillas Esther. They're called Eshkol HaKofer. He has 1 volume on Perkei Avos. And he also wrote something that is still unpublished. It's called Peirush Asara Sfiros. He wrote a commentary on the 10 Sfiros. He was a big Mekubal. He learned Kabbalah from Rabbi Yitzchak Bilion. Rabbi Avram Saba comes to Portugal, and I believe that his life is one of the most tragic lives of any of the Gedolei Yisrael. Avram Saba comes to Portugal, and he's writing his Sfarim, and then King Emmanuel said enough with the Jews. He's going to expel all the Jews from Portugal. But before he does so, he wants them to leave with one terrible gezerah. Every child under the age of 18 was taken from their parents and forcibly baptized. Parents never saw them again. So you think, okay, a few kids. No, not a few kids. Not some children. Not most Jewish children. Every single Jewish child from Spain who moved to Portugal under the age of 18 was taken from their parents, forcibly baptized. Rabbi Avram Saba had 2 little boys. They were taken out of his clutch. He never saw them again. Mamish, heartbreaking. Rabbi Avram Saba, at least he had his library. No, King Emmanuel sends, he confiscates the entire library of Rabbi Avram Saba. Rabbi Avram Saba at least has his personal manuscripts of his Sfarim. He hears word that if he doesn't get rid of them, he's a dead man. He buries his manuscripts. It's discovered that Rabbi Avram Saba's manuscripts were buried. He gets word if he doesn't burn them, he's going to be killed. He hides them under an olive tree. Perushim, manuscripts on Chamishay Chumshei Torah, on Megillas Esther, on Megillas Rus, on Kabbalah. He buries them. He never saw them again. So how do we have them? He goes to Morocco. In Morocco, he rewrites the Tzrar Hamor on Chamishay Chumshei Torah from memory, from complete memory. He wrote 5 volumes on Chumash. He wrote 2 volumes, again, Esther and Rus. He wrote on Perkei Avos. He writes it from memory. He has 1 son by the name of Yitzchak. Yitzchak has a daughter. Yitzchak's daughter marries Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Beis Yosef. So a little nechama. So Rabbi Ram Saba became the grandfather-in-law of Maran Bet Yosef. Very interesting. So Rabbi Ram Saba writes the following: if the purpose of Aaron HaKoyin in building the Mishkan, in doing the Avodah in the Mishkan, if the purpose was to rectify the sin of Adam HaRishon, so Adam HaRishon was chased out by Yigaresh. He was chased out. So what does Ribbono Shel Olam say to Aaron HaKoyin? Says Ribbono Shel Olam, V'ata hakrev, you come close. Adam HaRishon was thrown out. You have to come close. You have to come close. And not only you, your two sons. Because Adam's two sons, they were niskalkel, they messed up. Cain kills Hevel. So Aaron, you're fixing Adam. Adam was chased. V'ata hakrev. V'es banav itai. Banav to fix Cain and Hevel. Says the Shloach HaKadosh. That's the secret of the pasuk. B'chol Adam lo yeh b'yoyel moyed. No man literally could be in the Oyel Moed. What does that mean? When you do the Avodah, no human being could be in the Oyel Moed. The secret, says the Shla, is, Adam, you had your chance in Gan Eden. You have to stay out of this. You can't go into the Oyel Moed. V'chol Adam lo yeh b'Oyel Moed. Now, Adam, you need someone to fix up what your mistake was. Who fixes the sin of Adam? Aaron HaKoyin. Aaron HaKoyin, by building the Mishkan, he is in effect building the world. So Rabbi say, fill in the blanks. Olam, blank, Yibana. Chesed. Olam, Chesed, Yibana. Aaron HaKoyin has to build the world. Get an extra fry. Yeah? Aaron has to build the world. What is Aaron HaKoyin called? Tumecha, V'yurecha, Liyish, Chasidecha, because he has to build the world. B'midas HaChesed. Rabbi say, now we have to get into a very important question. Let's talk a little bit about Adam HaRishon in Gan Eden. Now, before we do that, there's a part of this week's Parsha which people just skim over. People are not interested in the karbanos. But at Rabbi, in this week's Parsha, it talks about the karbanos that Aaron HaKoyin brings. What does he bring? A bull, a par, and then 2 elim. The first ayil, we shecht, and we sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. The second ayil, we take the blood, we sprinkle it on Aaron's right earlobe. We sprinkle it on Aaron's right thumb. We sprinkle it on Aaron's big right toe. What are we doing that for? All of a sudden, the power we just shecht. The ayil we just shecht. The second ayil, no. We have to shecht it and sprinkle it on every right body part of Aaron. What's that all about? What's the meaning of that? So we don't think of that. We have more important things to worry about. But the thing is, we don't have more important things to worry about. This is the most important thing we have to worry about. Why the second ayil of the karbanos in Parshas Tetzaveh, not the par, not the first ayil, the second ayil? Why do we do that? Rabbi say, let's talk about what Adam HaRishon was wearing. That's a very important question, right? It's probably on your mind. Adam HaRishon, he's in Gan Eden. What's he wearing? Nothing. Right? He wasn't wearing anything, right? Okay. And yet, after Adam HaRishon eats from the tree, the Ribbono Shel Olam makes Adam HaRishon good clothing. The pasuk says, "Vayas Hashem Elokim le'Adam ule'ishtoi kas noisar." God made for Adam and his wife garments of leather. Vayalbi shem, and he clothed them. He made them garments of leather jacket, right? Adam was looking good, right? He was wearing leather jacket, leather pant. He had a whole suit, what? Leather boots, everything leather. Okay. What's this all about? Says it's Svar Hamor. These clothing only served one function, only served one purpose. What was their purpose? To cover the erva of Adam HaRishon. These were not dignified clothing. These clothing just allowed Adam to walk out in the street without being arrested. That's all it did. These were not, chashva clothing. Nobody's asking, hey Adam, where did you get that suit from? Nobody. It was just functional, just to cover Adam HaRishon. Aaron HaKoyin in the Beis HaMikdash, he's rectifying the matzav of Adam HaRishon. So Ribbono Shel Olam says, Aaron, step number 1 is, you got to get yourself some real clothing. Big day kahuna. And that's the meaning of the pasuk. It says in the beginning of the Parsha, what are the big day kahuna? Be'asisa Big day Kodesh, li'aroin achicha, lekavod ulesifaras. That Aaron's clothing, they were not just functional, they were dignified, they were honorable, they were beautiful, in order to rectify the clothing of Adam HaRishon. Rabbi say, fasten your seatbelts. Says the Medrash in Bamidbar Rabbah. What exactly were these clothing that Adam HaRishon was wearing in Gan Eden? Let's get a little, more technical here. What were they? Says the Medrash Bamidbar Rabbah, Parsha Daled Ois Ches. Adam HaRishon haya b'chayroi shel olam. Adam HaRishon was the firstborn. V'kivan shekerav karbanai. And when he brought his carbon, God was very pleased. Shenemar, like it says in Tehillim, V'sitav l'Hashem mishar par makrin mafris. That Adam brought a bull, an ox, with horns, with hooves. What was Adam wearing in Gan Eden? Lavash bigdei kehuna gedayla. Adam HaRishon in Gan Eden, you know what he was wearing? He was wearing the mechnasayim. He was wearing the mitznefes. He was wearing the kesoines. He was wearing the avnet. He was wearing the choshen, the ephod, the me'il, and the tzitz of the Kohen Gadol. What was Aaron HaKohen doing in Gan Eden? What was he wearing? He looked like the Kohen Gadol. So now we see that now there's really a parallel between Aaron HaKohen in the Beis HaMikdash and Adam HaRishon. Here they're wearing the same clothing. So when Aaron HaKohen is rebuilding the world, he has to wear the same clothing that Adam HaRishon wore. Fine. The Medrash continues. Bigdei Shevach hayu. You know what kind of clothing these were? These were Bigdei Shevach. What are Bigdei Shevach? Honorable clothing. Praiseworthy clothing. Says the Eitz Yosef, that's one girsa. But that's not my girsa. My text of the Medrash is he wasn't wearing Bigdei Shevach. He was wearing Bigdei Shabbos. Shabbos clothing. What do you mean Shabbos clothing? I thought they're Bigdei Kahuna. So somehow there's an association between the Bigdei Shabbos and the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. We see from here there's some kind of connection, some type of association between Shabbos clothing and the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi say, where does the Medrash see that Adam HaRishon was wearing Bigdei Kahuna? I mean, that sounds a little bit of a stretch. Adam HaRishon is wearing the begadim of the Kohen Gadol. Where do we see in the pasuk that Adam HaRishon was wearing the begadim of the Kohen Gadol? It says the Zohar HaKadosh. You got to count the number of words in the pasuk. Vayas Hashem Elokim leAdam uleishtai kasnais or vayalbishem. How many words in the pasuk? 8. Keneged, the 8 Bigdei Kahuna Gedayla. That's what the Zohar HaKadosh says. That's the remez in the pasuk that Adam HaRishon was wearing Bigdei Kahuna Gedayla. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Reb Meir. Let's talk about Reb Meir. Reb Meir had a very special Sefer Torah. The Medrash tells us that in the Sefer Torah of Reb Meir, on the pasuk that says that God made Adam HaRishon and his wife clothing, kasnais oyer, garments of leather, Reb Meir had a different pasuk. In the Sefer Torah of Reb Meir it said, kasnais oyer with an aleph. God did not make Adam and his wife garments of leather, but instead garments of light. Garments of light. Now what's the meaning of that? Did it really say in the Torah of Reb Meir, garments of light? Then I'll tell you one thing about Reb Meir's Sefer Torah. It was puzzle. If in Reb Meir's Sefer Torah it said kasnais with an aleph, you know what you'd have to do with it? Put it back in the bima and put the gartel on the outside of the mantle. It's puzzle Sefer Torah. You can't write an ayin. Now you have to know, in Lashon HaKodesh, this is a very amazing. The aleph and the ayin are almost interchangeable. The aleph always changes the ayin into a more spiritual form of something. For example, like here, Ar is leather, hide, it's a physical substance. Ar with an aleph is light, which is the intangible. You have in Hebrew, Oisher ve'oisher. Right? Oisher with an ayin is wealth. What's wealth? Ve'hakesef yana, we know what wealth is, money. But there's something even maybe less tangible than money, but more valuable than money. What's that? Oisha with an aleph. Oisha with an aleph is success, happiness, right? Well-being. Oisha with an aleph. So the aleph is a higher form of the ayin, as a more spiritual form of the ayin. But still, what does this mean that in the Sefer Torah of Reb Meir, it was written Kas Nois Ar with an Aleph? So who answers this question? The Rambam. The Rambam, in one of the commentaries on the Medrash, the Manas Kahuna, quotes the Rambam. The Rambam says like this: what was Adam HaRishon wearing before the sin? So we're trained to think like they told us in kindergarten. Adam HaRishon was wearing, the emperor's royal clothing before the, right? Adam HaRishon was not wearing anything before the sin. But actually, Adam HaRishon was wearing something. You know what he was wearing? His body radiated such light that it formed a glow around him. There was like an orb, a shine, a glow around Adam. That was his clothing. Before the sin, you see, before the sin, every person has a neshama. The neshama is a spiritual entity. The body, though, if you live properly, the neshama could purify the body, where even the body takes on a spiritual form. And that was Adam HaRishon before his sin. You see, the Medrash tells us before Adam HaRishon sinned, the ball of his ankle was so brilliant, was so illuminating, it put the sun to shame. So certainly you can imagine, his face radiated such a glow, you couldn't look at him. What was he wearing? What's the sun? You can't look at the sun. You couldn't look at Adam HaRishon. He was literally clothed in light, like we say about God. Oite or kasama. God dons light like a cloak. So Adam HaRishon also, he donned light. That was the state of his body before the sin. After his sin, his body descended. It went down. It became more and more physical, so God had to give him physical clothing. Says the Rambam, Rav Meir was always constantly focusing on the way Adam HaRishon was before the sin. Rav Meir's mind was always preoccupied with what life was like before the sin, that he mistakenly wrote in the Sefer Torah, Kas Nois Ar with an Aleph, because that was something he was always thinking about. However, the Arizal learns a little differently. The Arizal says, what does it mean in the Sefer Torah of Rav Meir? It said Kas Nois Ar with an Aleph. Rav Meir reached such a high madrega, where he purified himself to the level of Adam HaRishon before the sin. That's why we don't paskin like Rav Meir, because we cannot fathom the reasoning of Rav Meir. Rav Meir was on such a high level. He was able to achieve to some extent the level of Adam HaRishon before the sin, where Adam's clothing was this spiritual light. Fine. Very nice. So Rabbi say, what did Adam HaRishon wear before the sin? Garments of light. Rabbi say, what did he wear after the sin? Kas Nois Ar. What were the Kas Nois Ar? Big Day Kahuna Gedaila. The Big Day Kahuna, that's what the Medrash says. That Adam HaRishon before the sin, he radiated light. After the sin, his body no longer radiated light. He wore the Big Day Kahuna Gedaila. Says the Shlach HaKadosh, look at number 16. That Aaron HaKohen in this week's Parsha is being inaugurated as a Kohen. Rabbi said, what do we call a non-Kohen? A zar, a foreigner. Why do we call a zar? Why do we call a non-Kohen a foreigner, a zar? Says the Shla, you see what Aaron HaKohen had to do was Adam HaRishon had been so sullied, become so filthy, so physical from the injection of the snake. Chazal say that the snake injected Adam and his wife with a poison, with a zuhama, which that causes death. But it also caused our body to take on such a physical form that it really lowered the whole state of the body. That's why Aaron HaKohen needed to elevate himself above this physical status called Zaros and elevate himself to become a Kohen. But Rabbi said he had one problem. Because Adam HaRishon before the sin was clothed in light. So how is Aaron HaKohen going to elevate himself to that status? Says the Shlach HaKadosh, the Big Day Kahuna Gedaila, more than anything else in this world, are reminiscent of Kas Nois Ar with an Aleph. They are the closest thing that we have to those garments of light, those spiritual garments that Adam HaRishon wore before the sin. Rabbi say an amazing thing. What was the most important of the Big Day Kahuna? To make the case? The Chayshen. What did the Choshen have on it? The 12 stones. On the 12 stones, you have the 12 Shvatim and the name of the Avos. Rabbi said, you ever think, what in the world does the word Choshen mean? Choshen? There's no Hebrew word Choshen. What's the root of the word Choshen? Choshen? There's no such thing. Says Ashla, there is. Nachash. Nachash. The word Choshen is the tikkun of the Nachash. The Nachash tried to get Adam and Chava to disbelieve in God. So therefore, they unscramble the letters of the Nachash. They take the Nachash apart. They make the Choshen. They insert the Shema Mefayrash, the Urim Betumim. That is a tikkun for the Nachash HaKadmoni. That's what the Shlach HaKadosh says. Says Rabbi Avram Saba that Aaron HaKoyen takes a par. That's Keneged Adam HaRishon. Adam HaRishon was makar of a par. Aaron HaKoyen is makar of a par. That's Keneged Adam. The ayol. The ayol is Keneged Hevel. What do we do with that ayol? We just shecht it like any other carbon. But the second ayol is for Cain. Oh, Cain is we have a lot to fix up with Cain. Cain really destroyed things. He murdered his brother, right? He killed his brother. So therefore, says the Tzar Amar, the second ayol corresponds, that is a tikkun for Cain. And what do we bring with all these karbanos? Lechem matzos, v'chalois matzos. Only matzah. Why only matzah? Because there's one ingredient we don't want here. What is the nachash called? Sa'ar shebe'isa. The yeast in the dough. We don't want the nachash anywhere near any of these karbanos. We're trying to get rid of this nachash. We unscramble the nachash. We make the choshen. And therefore, all of the karbanos of Aaron HaKoyen consisted only of matzah. Gemara tells us from Masechta Avodah Zarah and Daf Yud Aleph. Says the Gemara, every 70 years in Rome, the Romans put on the following play, the following skit. You know what the Romans did? The Romans would take a yidala, a Jew, a weak Jew, a crippled Jew, and they would put on top of his back a big, robust descendant of Esav. And you know what kind of clothing they would put on this guy? Says the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the begadim of Adam HaRishon. What clothing did Adam HaRishon wear? The big day kahuna gedayla. So here you have a guy, a big guy, big muscles, weighs 330 pounds. Right? He could flick you away like that. Today there's a guy stuck in front of shul. Right? So we got the whole minyan out. We're trying to push him out. No, the car ain't going anywhere. You got one guy, he comes, bam, it comes right out, right? You have 10 guys we're pushing with shovels, and that doesn't move. So here, the Romans, every 70 years, they take one little yidala, and on top of him, they put a big guy, wearing the big day kahuna gedayla, and what's the demonstration? They pronounce, the 70 years are up, we rule the world. The question is, if they want to show they rule the world, why does the guy have to wear, let him wear, get some big linebacker and put on the jersey. He has to wear the begadim of the Kohen Gadol. What's he wearing the begadim of the Kohen Gadol for? The answer is, because the begadim of the Kohen Gadol represents the direction of the world. If the Kohen Gadol is wearing the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, that means we have a chance to restore the world back to its original order. When the Goyim are in possession of the begadim of Adam HaRishon, that means the world is just descending deeper and deeper and deeper. Who the man with the cloak, the man with the garment, he controls the direction of the world. It all depends on the big day, Kahuna Gedayla. When Aaron HaKohen was wearing the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, Vayehi, we're bringing the world back to natural order. When the Romans are wearing the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, that represents the fact that the destiny of the world lays in the hands of the Goyim. And that's why, you look in the beginning of Megillah Esther, what happens? Achashverosh, in the beginning of his 3rd year of the reign, he makes a cheshbon, the 70 years are over. So what happens? Beharoisai, Es oisher kevoid malchusai. V'yes yikar tiferes gelusai. So Achashverosh is showing off his majesty, his grandeur, his honor. Says the Gemara, what was Achashverosh wearing in the beginning of the Megillah? Says the Gemara, Masech Megillah Yud Beis, he was wearing the begadim of the Kohen Gadol. Why? How do I know? It says kavod, it says tifares, and it says about the big day kahuna gedola v'asisa, big day kodesh la'aron achicha lekavod u'lesifares. So Achashverosh is putting on the begadim of kahuna gedola. Why? What's he wearing the begadim of the kohen gadol? What? It looks good. They didn't put him on like the cover of the magazine, looking good, wearing the big day kahuna gedola. Well, what's he wearing it? The man that wears the begadim of the kahuna gedola, that symbolizes who's in control of the destiny of the world. Where is the world headed? Is it headed to the tikkun, the ultimate tikkun, or is it down the tubes? Especially, they're making a suda. And who's instigating the suda? Haman. And who's Haman? Haman's the Nachash. Haman min ha-Torah minayin hamin ha'etz. Haman's the Nachash. He's getting them to eat at the suda. He's being ma'ira the chet of the Eitz Hadas. So Haman's back at it. The Nachash is back at it. The Jews again are eating reminiscent of the Eitz Hadas. So the begadim of the kahuna gedola, Achashverosh is wearing, of course. So what does Mordechai put on? What kind of clothing is he wearing? He has to wear the most physical, the lowest grade clothing possible. Mordechai yada kol asher nasa. Vayikra Mordechai es begadav. He tears off his clothing. Vayilbash sak va'efer. His garments are now coming more and more megusham, more and more physical. The lowest sackcloth. Rabbi say, who wears sackcloth? Animals. It's big day behema. So now Mordechai sees who's wearing the big day kohen gadol. Who has the kas naisar? How far we've fallen from garments of light. Now we don't even have kas naisar with an ayin. Now we have sak va'efer. And Esther says, Mordechai, come on, put on a decent shirt, put on decent clothing. Mordechai refuses to change his clothing. Why? Because Mordechai understands. Look how far, look how distant we've fallen from kas naisar with an aleph. Rabbi say, what happens? At the end of the Megillah, we have a clothing turnaround. What happens? All of a sudden, Achashverosh tells Haman, Maher, kaches halavush, take the clothing. And what does Mordechai wear? Oh, Mordechai yatsa milfnei hamelech, bovosh malchus, tcheles, bachur, v'atarazav, tachrich butz v'argaman. So what's Mordechai wearing? At the end of Megillas Esther, he has a clothing change. He has a wardrobe upgrade. Now he's wearing clothing reminiscent of the Kohen Gadol. Tachrich butz, argaman. These are the materials of the big day kahuna. So in the beginning of the Megillah, Achashverosh is wearing the big day kahuna gedola. And Mordechai is wearing not even kas naisar with an ayin, he's wearing sak va'efer. And at the end of Megillas Esther, Mordechai is wearing big day kahuna gedola. What happened? How did that change? Rabbi say, listen to the following. How does a person accomplish transforming his body? After all, what's the body? It's it's hide, it's skin. The body itself is no different than a behema. How do you elevate this physical guf? The kas naisar with an ayin, how do you transform it into kas naisar with an aleph? So a very interesting sefer. It's called Chamra Tava, Rav Barkan, Parshas Vayikra. He says the following, very simple. You know how you do it? You take a behema, you smooth out the hide, you write on the behema, Oisi Sefer Torah. So you're transforming the hide of the animal into Torah, into light. You're taking a piece of a behema, you're taking hide, you're taking the skin of an animal, and you're elevating it into Torah. What's Torah? Torah, light. Okay, that's very nice. So now you've elevated the animal. But what's that got to do with you? How do you elevate your hide, your flesh? How does that happen? Rabbi said there's only one way. Gemara tells us, Masechta Shabbos, Daf Peches and Aleph, Amar Rabbi Avdimi, Bar Chama, Bar Chasa, Vayisyatzvu betachtis Hamor, Klal Yisrael stood under the mountain. Melamed, Shekafa Aleim Har Kegidus. God took Har Sinai, He suspended it over our heads, and He said, Mekamas HaTorah Mutav. You accept the Torah? Wonderful. Everything will be well. You'll make a lot of money, you'll be healthy, you'll have peace of mind, and if you don't accept the Torah, you'll be dead. What would you like? Which one? Which one do you choose? So Hashem basically said, you want the Torah? If you want the Torah, good, and if you don't want the Torah, also good. You don't have to go anywhere, you just stay right here. Stay right here. So the Gemara says Hashem basically stuffed the Torah down our throats, right? He twisted our arm, He forced us. So the obvious question is, why did Hashem have to do that? The Pasuk says in Parshas Mishpatim, what? Klal Yisrael said, Nasa v'nishma. We were very happy to accept the Torah. So that's the famous question. The Medrash Tanchum and Parshas Noach, the Daskenim Bali HaTosfos, and they both give the following answer. You ready? The Torah shebechsav, we were very happy to accept. Yeah. Well, we are totafot. What is that? We don't know. We don't know that. We'll keep Shabbos. We'll have a day of blowing. Everything. So the Klal Yisrael were willing to accept the written law. But the rabbis? No. The rabbis, we don't accept the rabbis. We don't accept the drabbanans. We don't accept Torah Sheba'al Peh. So the Torah Shebechsav, they said, Nasa v'nishma. The Torah Sheba'al Peh, God stuffed down our throat. Now the Gemara continues. And the Gemara says, well, if God stuffed it down our throat, then if we ever violated it, then Hashem can't punish us. Because we could say, we didn't ever want it in the first place. So the Gemara says, you're right. God was not able to punish us until we accepted the oral law. When did Klal Yisrael accept the Torah Sheba'al Peh willingly? On Purim. Says Gemara on Shabbos, says the Gemara, Amar Rava, number 24, Afal Pikein, Hador Kabluhu Bimei Achashverosh. Klal Yisrael accepted Torah Sheba'al Peh in the days of Achashverosh. Techsiv Kimu V'Kiblu HaYehudim. The Jews established and they accepted. Kimu Ma Shekiblu Kvar. Okay, very nice, beautiful. So if I were to ask you, when did Klal Yisrael accept the oral law? Purim. The written law, Shavuos. The oral law, Purim. Rabbi say, you have to know a very important thing about the Luchos HaBris. Chazal say that when Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Luchos down from Har Sinai the first time, the Luchos shone so brilliantly, so brightly, it shone from one end of the world to the other end of the world. That's what the Medrash says. The Luchos shone from one end of the world to the other end of the world. So interesting, that's what the Medrash says. Because if you look at the end of next week's Parsha, Parshas Kisisa, we find that when Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu the second Luchos, doesn't say the Luchos were shining. Guess who was shining? Moshe was shining. Moshe Rabbeinu was shining. To the point where he had to wear a mask. He had to cover his face because his face was shining. So could someone explain that to me? Why by the first Luchos, the Luchos were shining? And by the second Luchos, Moshe Rabbeinu was shining. Rabbi, I'm going to tell you something very important. What is the relationship between Klal Yisrael and the Torah? So, what happens? You take the Sefer Torah out of the Aron, everybody stands up, everyone hugs it, everyone kisses it, everyone escorts it. At the end of the day, when you finish laying, you put it back. So the Sefer Torah goes into the Aron, and you go back home into your bed. So what's your relationship with the Torah? You come visit a little bit, on Shabbos, you make it, and if you're here, you give it a little shmek, you give it a kiss, and then you go off on your business. So, yeah, we learn the Torah, but you can't say we're the Torah. The Torah is in its house, and we go to our house. That's our relationship to Torah Shebechsav. And you should know that when Moshe came down with the first Luchos, Beis Halevi writes, and the Netziv writes even more, the Netziv writes, the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh was written on the Luchos Rishonos. This whole Shiur was on the Luchos Rishonos. I didn't get it from there, but the whole Torah Sheba'al Peh, all of Shas, all the Midrashim, the Zohar HaKadosh, everything, the Ben Ish Chai, everything was on the Luchos Rishonos. Rabbi Vadia, all the Tshuvas, it was on, fine, Luchos Rishonos. What happened? When Moshe Rabbeinu broke the first luchos, Hashem said, we can't make the Torah so easy, where everything is just written down. So Klal Yisrael started to forget Torah. Hashem said, by the second luchos, you just write Torah Shabachsav. Torah Shabal Peh, you got to figure out on your own. You have to use Yud Gimel Midah Shatar Nidreshes Bam. You have to break your head. You have to sweat. You have to toil. Kal v'chomer, Gzeira Shava, Hekish, Davar Halami Min HaKlal, Davar Sheyotza Min HaKlal. All the various means and tools that we use to understand Torah Shabal Peh was only necessary with Luchos Shniyos. So where was Luchos Shniyos? Where was the Torah Shabal Peh written then? It wasn't on the Luchos. You know where it was written? Shlomo HaMelech tells us, Kasveim aluach libecha. Write it on your heart. Says the Beis Halevi in the Drashas. By the Luchos Rishainos, everything was written on the Luchos. So guess what's shown? The Luchos. Not Moshe. Moshe is just the guy who takes the Torah down from our Sinai and offers it to us and we learn it. But Moshe doesn't shine. The Torah shines. It's the Torah are, not the Moshe are, the Torah. But now that in the Luchos Shniyos, the second Luchos, it's not written on them, the Torah Shabal Peh. The Torah Shabachsav is written on them. Where is the oral law written? It's written on Moshe Rabbeinu's heart. So Moshe Rabbeinu became a virtual Sefer Torah. The entire body of oral law was written on the heart of Moshe Rabbeinu. So by the first Luchos, the Luchos shine. By the second Luchos, Moshe is shining. And Moshe has to cover himself with a mask. Because he's the Torah. Says the Beis Halevi, the Torah Shabal Peh is much greater than the Torah Shabachsav. Because Torah Shabachsav, you learn it, but it's written on the Torah. So the Torah has Kedushas HaTorah, and the person who learns it has Kedushas Tashmishe Kedusha. Right? You know there's a difference. You have Tefillin. So the Parshios of Tefillin are Etzem HaKedusha. The Ritzuos are Tashmishe Kedusha. They service the Parshios. The Torah, Sefer Torah is Etzem HaKedusha. If you learn it, you become somebody who services the Torah. But now with the Torah Shabal Peh, a Jew who learns Gemara, he becomes the Torah. He becomes Etzem HaKedusha. There is no greater elevation in the world than learning Torah Shabal Peh. You know why? Because what's the klaf of the Torah Shabal Peh? The Jew who learns it. The Jew's mind who learns Torah Shabal Peh is the klaf of the Torah Shabal Peh, is the luchos of the Torah Shabal Peh. So by luchos rishonos, who was shining? The luchos. By luchos shniyos, who was shining? Moshe Rabbeinu. He has to cover himself with a mask. But let me ask you a question. Why weren't the Jews shining when Moshe offered them the Torah Shabal Peh? Because they didn't want it. They didn't want the Torah Shabal Peh. Hashem had to stuff it down our throats. Hashem had to force us. Moshe wanted the Torah Shabal Peh, so Moshe was shining. The Jews didn't want the Torah Shabal Peh, so the Jews weren't shining. When did the Jews willingly accept Torah Shabal Peh? Purim! So Mordechai sees Klal Yisrael is embracing the Torah Shabal Peh. Mordechai takes off the sakva efer. Mordechai takes off his ragged clothing and he puts on kasnois ar with an aleph, the big day kahuna gedola. Says the Shlah HaKadosh, what are the big day kahuna gedola? These are the garments of light. So when Mordechai sees kimu v'kiblu, he sees Klal Yisrael has embraced Torah Shabal Peh. Now we are all on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu when he willingly accepted the Torah Shabal Peh by the Luchos Shniyos where Moshe was shining. So Mordechai puts on the big day kahuna gedola. What does the pasuk say after Mordechai puts on the big day kahuna gedola? La Yehudim Haisa Ira with an aleph. Because Mordechai sees that Klal Yisrael have embraced the light of the Torah. The kasnois ar with an aleph. So by the luchos rishonos, the luchos were shining. By the luchos shniyos, Moshe was shining. By Purim, all of Klal Yisrael was shining. La Yehudim Haisa Ira. If you look in the Archaim HaKadosh at the end of Parshas Kisisa, Archaim HaKadosh says this explicitly. That why is Moshe Rabbeinu putting on a mask when he's coming down with the Torah? You know why he's putting on a mask? Because his face is illuminating with Kas Nois Ar with an Aleph. And therefore in the times of Purim, when all of Klal Yisrael embrace the Torah Shabbat Peh, La Yehudim Haisa Oira, perhaps that is why the minhag is to wear Big Day Shabbos on Purim. Not because it's a Yom Tif. Purim is absolutely not a Yom Tif. Because the Big Day Shabbos, the Medrash says, are reminiscent of the Big Day Kahuna Gedolah. That was a celebration. That while Haman succeeded in allowing Achashverosh to wear the Big Day Kahuna Gedolah, and Mordechai now has to wear the Sak V'Efer, but Klal Yisrael embraces the Torah Shabbat Peh, we are elevated to the status of La Yehudim Haisa Oira. We reach the level of Kas Naisar with an Aleph. And there's a minhag to wear Big Day Shabbos on Purim. But there's also another minhag. The Ramah brings down, look at number 31, Simon Tafresh Sadik Vav. We have a minhag to wear a mask on Purim. Why are you wearing a mask? So some say it's Hester Panim, Banochi Haster Aster Es Panai. Or dressing up. It's so simple why we're wearing a mask. Do we find anywhere in Tanakh anyone wearing a mask? Yeah. Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did he wear the mask? Because what did he accept? Torah Shabbat Peh. So the Yom Tif of Purim is the Yom Tif that, not that we didn't accept the Torah Shabbat Chsav. We accepted what? Torah Shabbat Peh. So of course, it's the Yom Tif that every Jew wants to be like Moshe Rabbeinu. On Purim, every Jew reached the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. So how do you show we reach the How would a person show that he lovingly embraces Torah Shabbat Peh? There's only one way to do it. You got to put a mask on. You have to show that you embrace the Torah Shabbat Peh and you're elevating your physical hide to Kas Nois Ar with a Aleph. Okay, now get ready for this. Davar Chadash. The Gemara Masechta Tainus asks, when Moshe Rabbeinu taught Aaron HaKohen what to do during the Shivas Yimei Miluim, what kind of clothing was Moshe Rabbeinu wearing? What did he wear? Kapata, Bekisha, Shtraim, what was he wearing? Says the Gemara, what do you mean what he's wearing? He was wearing plain white clothing. So the Shlach HaKadosh asks, well, what's the shackle of Atari over here? What do you mean, why wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu wearing Big Day Kahuna Gedolah? Says the Shlach HaKadosh, it's so pashat. What are the Big Day Kahuna Gedolah? They are the garments of light with an Aleph. Did Moshe Rabbeinu need to wear Big Day Kahuna Gedolah to achieve Kas Naisar with an Aleph? He didn't need that. From the moment Moshe Rabbeinu was born, Vayar Isai Kitayv. Rashi says, what does it mean Vayar Isai Kitayv? Nismale Kol Habayis Oira. The whole house was filled with light. Moshe Rabbeinu was Makabel the Torah. His body emanated light. His face emanated light. He doesn't need Big Day. What's Big Day Kahuna Gedolah? Big Day Kahuna Gedolah is the way to try to restore the Kas Naisar with an Aleph. Says the Shlach, Moshe didn't need it. He didn't need artificial clothing. He was Kas Naisar with an Aleph. He did shine from the moment he was born, continuing until he was Makabel the Torah. That is why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't wear Big Day Kahuna. Not because he wasn't on the Madrega. He didn't need it. So perhaps that's why Moshe's name is not in Parshas Tetzaveh. It's not L'Gnusay Shonat Moshe. It's not his disparagement. It's not Hashem saying, okay, you don't want to be in my book, so don't be in my book. It's L'Shivchai Shel Moshe. Moshe's name is not in Parshas Tetzaveh. Because Hashem is saying, Moshe, you have this one covered. You're good with Tetzaveh. You already got there. You already accomplished the purpose of what's the Big Day Kahuna? You want to elevate Kas Naisar with an Ayin to Aleph. Moshe, you did that a long time ago. You came down from Har Sinai. You're shining. You've been shining your whole life. Your whole life you've been Kas Naisar with an Aleph. So that perhaps, Rabbi Isai, is a new explanation why Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not in Parshas Tetzaveh. It's not L'Gnusay Shel Moshe Rabbeinu. It's L'Shivchai Shel Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't need the Big Day Kahuna of Kavod and Tifaras to elevate his physical being to Kas Naisar with an Aleph. This is something Moshe Rabbeinu had achieved through his embrace of Torah Shabbat Peh, and therefore as we prepare for Purim, Haba Aleinu L'Tova, let us dedicate ourselves to the Kas Naisar with an Aleph, to the Torah Shabbat Peh, Mishro B'Zoicha, La Yehudim, Haisa, Oira. Thank you for coming.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.